What's good? What's going on, everybody? How y'all doing? This is your boy Deshaun Ewing here for a system breaker conversation, and I'm very excited about today's conversation because I have a couple of guests who are going to definitely give us some insight, some thoughts, some perspective that I believe we all need to partake and really ingest. So the first guest I have with me is this lady right here, Miss Sumaiyah Clark. Sumaiyah, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm doing well. I'm glad you're here with us. We also have Miss Arnitta Holliman with us, and we were having some technical issues for a moment, but I think she can hear us now.
Yes,
All right, we are good.
hello.
Arnitta, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing very, very well. So I am excited to have you both with us. You are both women, not just women, individuals that I admire in this city of Milwaukee. We have all both known each other. We've known each other for years in different spaces. And so to have you all in the capacity of what you do within the community, within the city, within the county, I think this is something that people really need to tune into and connect with. So if you are out there in Facebook world, I'm going to ask you to please watch party this, share this with your friends, send this around so that we can make sure that people are getting this conversation as often as they can. So Sumaiyah, what I'm going to do is have you both introduce yourselves as you see fit. You can talk about what you do, how you do it, but just give people maybe a couple minutes of who you are and why you do the work you do. So, Sumaiyah, I'll start with you, Arnitta, and I'm going to jump off the screen.
All right. Well, Deshaun, thank you for inviting me. I'm definitely honored to be here today, especially on a panel with Miss Holliman, who's amazing as well. So I'm a native to Milwaukee. I have been working in community health, public health, a variety of nonprofits and government for the last 20 plus years. I'm really passionate about making sure that community members have access to resources and care that's appropriate, that meets their needs, that's delivered in a way that promotes dignity and also really is culturally responsive. It's respectful of their backgrounds and their culture. I currently work with Milwaukee County government, and in my daytime there, I'm really passionate about making sure that there's policy that supports racial and health equity, and also making sure that the staff that we have who are providing care to individuals have the skills that they need to make sure that they're effective working with our community members.
So, Sumaiyah, thank you so much for being with us once again. And I'm going to go ahead and put Arnitta up and allow her to do the same thing of introducing herself.
Hello again. It's great to be with you both. I'm Arnitta Holliman. I work in the Office of Violence and Prevention, so that's Grand City's Health Department. My role there is as the Recast Program Manager. So I am filling Sumaiyah's old shoes. So when she went to be with the county, I came to the city, and I'm in the role that she was in previously. So our focus in Recast is resiliency in communities after stress and trauma, and the focus is on promoting resilience, equity, justice, of course, also promoting healthy mental health and well-being for youth and families that are at risk of experiencing trauma. I am a licensed professional counselor, so my background is in clinical psych. I have worked in a number of settings in terms of clinical work, so school clinic, private practice, community clinic. I worked for a number of years in a prison, serving both men and women who were incarcerated. And so I love helping people heal, right? So I think healing is a journey, and everyone has their individual journey. But I love helping people when walking with them on that journey.
But once again, thank you for being with us. And so that's actually a lot of what we're going to talk about today is that journey that we're on as a community, as a Black people, as a people who have seen systemic racism for our lifetime and our parents' lifetime and the lifetimes of those before them. So, first thing I want to ask you all is, how do you feel about how things are playing out right now? So let's just hit that with the protests, with the systemic conversations that are happening. How do you personally feel about those things happening right now? Whoever wants to answer first, feel free. I know that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah, I think I have mixed feelings. There are a lot of feelings, honestly. I think we're at a pivotal place in our community and in our society as a whole. There are a lot of, I think we're on the cusp of an opportunity for a lot of change. However, I sometimes I get a little unsure about how much of that change we're going to see and how much of it will be, performative in some ways, or just some minor adjustments and not really the change at the level that we really need to see it. So I get concerned about that. At the same time, I'm watching people who are doing amazing work, but that are hurting in the middle of all of this, because it's a lot and it's heavy. And particularly if you're a person of color and if you're Black, doing this work, there's a heaviness that comes with that. It's a lot of responsibility to shoulder at the same time while you're experiencing it in a way that your white counterparts may not be, or aren't, not necessarily, may not be, they aren't. So,
Right.
so there's a lot. I'm still hopeful though that we'll see some changes happen that needed to happen for a long time now.
Okay, Sumaiyah, what about you?
So I would say, I think there's like a bit of a delay. I apologize for that. So I would say that similar to Arnitta, like it's just like this emotional overload right now, because you're seeing what's happening with people who are being, like murdered, and, you want to have justice, and in order to really begin to heal, like you can't have healing without justice, right? Like the two are not separate. You have to have them together. So that's difficult, right? When we talk about, addressing trauma and addressing what's happening in our community, like first we need to start with justice. And then the other things are, we're talking about homicides and police brutality and all of these things that have been happening like for a long time prior to COVID, for a long time prior to the unrest that we're seeing right now. And so the challenge is that there's this long-standing institutional racism and institutional oppression that has, that has impacted us for generations, as you talked about, like our grandmother, our great grandparents, for the last 500 years that we've kind of been dispersed.
Yeah. And so that's really heavy stuff that you both talked about, those emotions that play a part in this journey that we're on right now, finding ourselves in the midst of a lot of chaos, but also a lot of hopefulness that, okay, this might be a change point. This might be a pivot point. You spoke a little bit about that historical or generational trauma. Do you guys want to speak a little more about that, and what do you feel? So let's go ahead and tackle that, the systemic spaces that you see.
I mean, if you think about all of the systems in this country that were all built and are still rooted in, racist, oppression and white supremacy. And so that's something to start with, and so I know that there's a lot of debate, like, is it possible to like reform a system from within, or does the system need to be removed and, you start from scratch and now you rebuild it? So that's something that we gotta contemplate and really try to weigh, like what is the best strategy to begin to address some of these things. So I know that that's something, is like starting with government, starting with policy, looking at how monies are invested, how things are disinvested from, areas and individuals.
Absolutely. There is a lot of that we don't talk about, that disinvestment, how things are taken out of communities and nothing put in to bridge a gap or to take away or to fill that space. So Arnitta, you have some things you want to say about the systems?
Like Sumaiyah, I work in government. I work at the city level, and I think that I agree with what she said. I mean, there's a lot that needs to be changed, and it's not just within government. It's in every single system, whether that's education or healthcare. The fact that our healthcare system, when you think of healthcare, most people are not thinking about mental health. That needs to be changed. If we think about healthcare, that has to include mental health, and there needs to be mental health parity in terms of what services people can receive with their insurance or without insurance, and the same level of service. And then we get to the systemic issues around how we're treated when we go into the doctor's office or to see a therapist or whatever, when you're a person of color, when you're a Black person. And so there's so many levels of change that need to happen, and it needs to happen in every system, because as Sumaiyah mentioned, every system is built on this foundation of racism and white supremacy. And I quote Dr. Joy, who's always saying that, Dr. Joy DeGruy. And so we can't escape that reality. And so if we're going to see any significant change, we're going to have to look at how these systems were built, the mechanisms by which they were built, who is profiting and who is benefiting from these systems, and not just the fact that people that there are groups of people that do not benefit, but also who's benefiting, how, why, all of that. And so that's a lot to break down, but it still needs to happen. And when it comes to spending, I've heard it said before that, where you invest your money tells, even in scripture, it talks about, where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. So where you put your money, where your budget, however your budget is aligned, is what you care about.
That's very powerful when you think about that, because when we're talking about the changes that we need to see, what we're really talking about is, where are our government systems investing their dollars? What are you showing us that's important to you? So if you're disinvesting from the communities, you're clearly showing us our communities aren't important to you. We agree on that.
Go ahead.
Please, Arnitta.
Well, I think that's not just in government. I think that's across the board. So if we look at education and we look at how monies were taken, programs were cut for music and arts and those kinds of things that, are absolutely beneficial both to the mental health and well-being of children, but also in their overall development. And so education, government, in the nonprofit sector, it doesn't really matter where it is. I mean, right now, obviously, there is a lot of focus on divesting from police or, other kinds of things, but we really have to look at that across the board. Whatever organization you work in, where does the majority of that money go? I get it that there's usually a big chunk that goes to salaries, but even with that, to who and how much, and besides that, what else is that money going to? Where's the money being invested? That's going to show you what really matters.
I agree. And one of the things that I'd just like to add to that is not addressing these policies or these approaches in any of these systems from like a colorblind perspective. And so making sure that you're intentional and you're looking at the race, you're looking at the health outcomes, you're looking at all of these different indicators that let you know who's benefiting more and where there are disparities, right? So there's a cool project that I know, the project, or I should say a shift. It's not even a project, it's something that they're doing permanently, the Milwaukee Park system. So they actually developed like this racial equity index that showed, oh my goodness, like we have been like investing in parks in certain neighborhoods. And so now there's been a push over the last year, and then even into budgets moving forward, to make sure that they're looking at all of these different indicators and they're not addressing it from a colorblind approach, so that parks in neighborhoods that have the highest need can be prioritized for updates and upgrades. And as you know, like green space is one of the things that we need for like safe, green space and stuff. It's one thing that we need for a healthy environment. So that's a good example that I know that is more recent, but I think that's a good example.
Yeah, it's a very great example of being able to show that there are some communities that have been neglected, and now it's time to prioritize those communities over other communities that for 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years have gotten the upfront investment.
Right.
So, with that being said, you mentioned color blindness. So, let's talk about that a little bit because we hear and we're still hearing people talking about they want to be colorblind, they don't see color. And when you're talking about changing systems, whatever the system is, you can't come from that approach. Can you both talk a little bit more about why that is fundamentally crucial to making any change to avoid that colorblind mentality? Oh, I don't see color. Color doesn't matter to me. Whoever wants to go first. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and say, Arnita.
Okay, I think you were saying me before. So it's a fallacy, and quite frankly a disrespect. The idea that you don't see color. Yes, we know that race is a social construct. However, we're here. And so race has been an issue for a very long time, and everything we do for Black folks. And let me just speak for me, but for me and other Black folks that I know, our race is very salient. We don't get to wake up on any particular day and not remember that we're Black, right? And so if we recognize that there is a reason for that, and because we know how we're treated, how we're viewed, all of those things. And so people are not, without you, well, use a double negative, not seeing color, they're seeing color, right? And so if people are seeing color, then absolutely it's playing a role in housing, in who gets the loan, who gets the job, any of those things. And so any of these systems, whatever they're doing, you cannot take a colorblind approach. And really, I think any real analysis that would try to do that, I would actually question the authenticity and the genuineness in really wanting to make change and really wanting to get to the heart of an issue. Because if you're ignoring race, you absolutely are ignoring the root of the problem, and you are not invested in fixing it.
I think those are amazing points, Arnita. One of the things that I found pretty interesting is that there's some Black and brown people who I've heard say that recently. And when you hear them talk more and they start to do like a deeper dive, at least with the ones that I've interacted with, well, I don't want you to, right, and wanting to be seen for who you are and your skills, and being considered for other promotions aside from just being the newest diversity recruit or the diversity officer, right? Like we can do a whole lot more stuff than be a diversity officer. So I just think that that's something that's pretty interesting. And to me, it's related to, I think at the beginning you talked about this emotional tax or this emotional burden that, Black and brown people experience when they're in these predominantly white spaces, where it's just like, hey, I just want to be able to do my job. And then you start to have this kind of internalized stuff that bubbles up where it's like, well, I just don't even want you to see color. So I just think that that's something that's been interesting for me. I've not only just seen it from, like white people who are saying, oh, can't we just get along? I don't even see color, but also Black people who are saying, and in my belief, I'm seeing it as, I just want to be able to do my job and be respected for the skills that I bring.
That is very interesting.
I think we all.
Go ahead, Arnita.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we all just want to be able to do our jobs and be respected for our skill and our work. But the reality is that's not the world we're living in. And so sometimes, and I think that kind of speaks to some of the cognitive dissonance or some of the other things that people are struggling with around, what's the ideal situation versus what's the reality, right? So even when we think about our own identity, there's a ideal self and then there's the real self, right? And so what we want congruence between the two of those. We want our ideal self to be just as close, to line up as much as possible with our real self. And the reality is an idea of having a colorblind world and doing things without being seen, your color, playing a role, your race playing a role. We're not there. We're not even close to being there. And so our ideal world for folks who are, feeling that, I get the sentiment, and I agree that we should be, in that kind of society, and things should be that way. But the real world is not like that at all. And so we've got to do the work to make that ideal world and real world line up. And then we can say, okay, there's not an issue about race, and I can just come to work and do my job and not have to worry about that.
Absolutely. And so with that, you brought up cognitive dissonance and dissonance. And I talked about that on a number of different times I've been on, which is the idea of being able to hold conflicting ideas, beliefs, values at the same time. And we know that's the history of America. When you really think about it and understand how America was built, they were able to say we weren't human in order to get work out of us, right? That's cognitive dissonance, saying, I know this is a person, but this isn't really a person because I need to have them able to do X, Y, and Z. So they don't count as human, but they are human, but I can't say that publicly. I can't say that out loud. I can have, let's just go to the history of America. You can have a person that's not human as a slave, but you can definitely have sex with them and father children by them, but they're not human. How do you see cognitive dissonance happening? I don't know if you guys were able to hear that question. I cut myself out, I think, too soon. So how do you see cognitive dissonance playing right now?
Oh. Yeah, so I think that's a great point when you think about how are you subhuman or less than a whole human when it comes to labor, but somehow you're human enough to have sex, to rape. So let's be clear about that. And yes. I think that, there's obviously some cognitive dissonance there. It's about, I think there's a deeper level of illness though. So we all.
Arnitta, you're breaking up a bit on my end.
Can you still hear me?
I hear you now.
Oh, can you hear me?
Uh-oh, we're having some technical difficulty, folks. Hang on with us here.
Yeah, okay. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, you're good now.
Okay, yeah, so I think that we all at times have, moments or situations where we experience some cognitive dissonance. I think that's a deeper level of pathology, though, that you can, you can capitalize, you can treat someone like a commodity. So they aren't human enough to have equal rights or equity or any of those things. This person is person enough for you to have sex with, to rape, to, any of those things. That again is a deeper level of pathology, and that's a little more than, the cognitive dissonance that I think, most humans experience at some point.
Right. And I would just add to that, I think it is related to what we're saying now, because there's an interesting diagnosis that came about in the 1800s called drapetomania. So like you kind of think about the pathology of, around people who are diagnosing us or even interacting with us when they can do these kind of horrific things. And so drapetomania is so interesting because if you don't want to be oppressed anymore and you actually rise up and fight against it, that's considered a mental health disorder, right? And so think about how we're pathologizing our young people, or I should say the people who actually probably have the pathology are trying to project that onto our young people and other people who are rising up right now. So I just think that the whole concept is just very interesting.
That is very interesting concept of where if you want to break free of your bondage, something has to be wrong with you for wanting that freedom from. Yeah, there's a whole deep level there that we don't have the time for, but I would love to get you guys on for that conversation in a larger space. Now, Arnitta, I know you're having some issues where you might lose you shortly. So what I want to do really quickly before that happens is have you both speak to what is going on from the perspective of being a woman, a Black woman, and seeing, feeling, and hearing all that's going on. What are your thoughts and your feelings in that space? Arnitta, because you have your situation, I'm going to let you go first just in case something happens. Is that okay?
Okay, sure. I want to be mindful of kind of how I frame this, but I think that as a Black woman right now, my personal thought is that we as a people come together and we band together, we do the work to move this movement forward, and any of the other issues, because there are other issues. There are issues around patriarchy and misogyny and all of those things. However, I think what's most important is that the whole, for all of us, all Black lives, for all of us, that we're moving the movement forward and seeing the systemic change that we need to see, and then we can deal with some of those other things that we still need to deal with. I'm proud to be Black. I'm proud to be a Black woman. I'm proud to stand alongside my brothers and sisters, Black, brown, and really fight for systemic change and change even on the individual level, because sometimes that change is one conversation at a time with each other, and sometimes the change is not necessarily around, how do we change the system, but it's like, how do I change the way I handle myself each day so that I can be healthy, so I can continue to fight. And so I'm proud to do that. I'm proud to be a Black woman doing that. And I'm in it for the long haul with my people. That's my stance.
Wow, that's wonderful. I think for me, the first thing that popped up is Black woman as a mother, right? Because I have three children, and my middle child, who's 15 years old, is a boy, and he just this past week started practicing driving for the first time, and so all of these emotions bubble up as a mother because you want to protect him, yet at the same time, you know that you need to allow him to kind of spread his wings as well. And it just makes me think, like, how much my mother and my grandmother and my great grandmother must have felt, giving birth to male children, knowing that, what could be, what could happen to them, like in larger society, so those things are always difficult. One of the other things, though, that I've had to do is be very, have grace for myself, and then allowing myself to step back and take time for myself, not feeling like I always, sometimes it's Black women, because I mean, honestly, there's not as many, unfortunately, Black men in the spaces that I work in, in the county. That's a huge issue in government, and there's not a lot of Black men that are there. And so oftentimes you can be roped in to try to be like the spokesperson for everyone, or to have to like translate what's happening, or, let's just be real, like colorism, right? So I have in some spaces, I might be considered a safe Black person. And so some folks, they come to the safe Black person to try to translate. And so being very clear and setting boundaries to not step into that role and to call people on it when they're doing those things. So that can be tough, because when you call people on it, then you become the angry Black woman. And so so there's all these different things and stuff that you have to wear and you have to navigate, when you're in these white spaces, but then also, they going back to your community, which I think is that dual identity, that a lot of us have to navigate.
All right. So you broke up right at the tail end of what you were saying, Sumaiyah. I heard you say something about dual identity. And then we might have lost connection with Sumaiyah for a moment there. See if we can get her back. So while we still have you, Arnitta, Sumaiyah talked about the duality, the dual identity, and I think we might have Sumaiyah back with us. Okay, cool. So talking about that from the lens of, what advice do you have for yourself, or that you would also give others for how to deal with that duality of being Black, being in the world of business, being in the world of corporate America, government, whatever it might be, and how does that work with dealing with trauma, even in your own personal trauma in the workspace? What advice might you have for someone when it comes to that?
So I think for me, one, I show up as unapologetically Black wherever I am. And so I've been in spaces, and when I was younger, I code switched and all of that. So don't get me wrong, I had my own journey. Now it's like, this is who I am. I'm still a professional. I'm still good at what I do. I'm still the woman for the job, right? So, and at the same time, I try to take care of myself. So Sumaiyah talked about having those boundaries around what you will and you won't do. If somebody's coming to you because they perceive you as the safe Black person, even if it's not, they're not consciously aware that they're doing it, and they're doing it, setting boundaries around what you will and you won't do, what you will say, what you won't say, how you will or will not be used. That's going to be really important because for me, the way I look at it is, at the end of the day, I got to come home and be comfortable with who I am and how I manage my day. Not just, did I get certain tasks done, but was I being true to myself in each of the moments that, throughout the day. And so I want to be true to who I am through each moment, each experience, each interaction, but still, do my best work and still do my best work. It's not a but. I can do both of those. And I think for people just recognizing, who are you, where are you, and how do you show up fully as you are, as a Black man, as a Black woman, still do your best work, your greatest work, be proud of yourself at the end of the day, and not have to give in to the pullings and the strivings of other people who are trying to pull you in one direction or another that is not true to who you are, and that is going to cause you to compromise in some way, whether that's compromise as it relates to your race or racial group or whatever, or any other value or ethical moral standard that you might have.
Yeah,
so I think stay true to yourself. That's it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like whether it be your dress, whether it be all of the other intersectionalities, so I think that's so important to stay true to yourself and be consistent, because otherwise you'll be, running in a circle and chasing your tail. And that is a whole other level of mental health difficulties that you'll begin to experience when you do that. So if you said, just be consistent. And like my grandfather used to say, wherever you go, there you are, and that has a lot of.
Looks like Sumaiyah has frozen once again. Unfortunately, we'll get that back up and running. And she was saying something so powerful. Oh, I hate when.
Yeah. I know, so good. I love that quote. Like, wherever you go, there you are. It's really the truth. And to your point about the trauma, people have experienced a lot of things, and you have to deal with your junk. Everybody's got junk they need to deal with. You have to deal with your own junk, because the reality is what Sumaiyah said: wherever you go, there you are. And if you haven't dealt with your traumatic experiences, if you haven't dealt with your losses, with your hurts and whatever things that were done to you, you're going to bring with you, and it is going to play out in how you interact with your business partners or your coworkers or in the community or in the work that you do. And so everybody has an individual responsibility to heal, to take care of yourself by dealing with whatever traumas you've experienced and doing the work to heal. And it's work, but it's good work. So do the work to heal so that you can show up wholly and not in parts, and so that your trauma is not spilling out on everybody else.
Yeah.
Sumaiyah, anything you want to add to that as far as trauma?
One of the things that I think is interesting about trauma is when we think about the different types of trauma. So oftentimes trauma, it has a very narrow kind of definition, right? Only what this person has experienced, only what's happened to that person. But we're not looking at like the intergenerational trauma, as Arnitta spoke about earlier, or historical stuff, or we even hear, as some of us get into these types of work because of something that we've seen in our own community or our environment, and it makes us passionate about wanting to change, right? But there's this other trauma and synergistic trauma that comes up because it's like, I'm still dealing with the stuff every single day. Like when when there were helicopters, the helicopters, you know, that were coming over Milwaukee, they're circling over my house. I'm hearing them, you know, you're seeing National Guard, whereas my colleagues don't experience that. So not only are we experiencing it ourselves, but we're also, you know, trying to work with others who are experiencing this trauma too. And that's something that's really unique when we think about like the different levels of compounding trauma that we're exposed to.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you bring up, Sumaiyah. And so that is the very reason why I think it's so important that we have to be honest with ourselves about what we're experiencing. Like time out for, I mean, I know there's still a lot of stigma around mental health or mental illness rather, but time out for that. I mean, we've got to be honest with ourselves. Yep, I'm having a hard time because I've been hearing helicopters all night, and that's frightening for me and my family. Or it reminds me of, you know, a different situation. So we've got to be honest with ourselves about what we're experiencing. We have to be honest about the fact that we need help. No, you know, again, here we go, the cliche, no man is an island, but seriously, we need each other and we need help. And we're not going to make it through this. We're not going to thrive through this without getting whatever help we need. And that means if I need to reach out to Sumaiyah and say, hey girl, how did you do such and such? Or reach out to somebody else and say, hey, I think I do need to see a therapist. Do you have a recommendation? Or whatever that is. Or you know what? I think I need to take a mental health day or 2 or 10 from work seriously and take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Great point. Sometimes you got to call in. Hey, I see we got a nice. How's it going, Mr. Smith? But yeah, sometimes you can call in Black. You know, sometimes you can call in Black for a day.
Yes.
Call in Black and say, I need my time back. How about that? Reclaiming my time.
Yes.
Come on now.
I have called in Black before. I'm not going to say where I was when I did it, but I did call in Black before. And it was necessary.
And then it's real. Like when we're in these spaces, you have to have that time for yourself to be like, you know what, I just can't do it today. Right. Or when you have colleagues who are of another race or color and they want to have those conversations, and you just don't want to have those conversations on that day they want to have the conversation. You have to be able to have that. Go ahead, Arnitta.
Oh, no, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I was just going to say you're not obligated to do that. So if you want to have the conversation, have it. But if you don't want to, you don't have to. You're not obligated to do that. And so when we think about boundaries, we're typically thinking about geographical space or physical space. There are all kinds of boundaries. There are boundaries around words. There's certain words you can't say to me. You cannot call me out my name. I got a boundary around that. You know, so there are boundaries around emotions. You cannot send me I'm not going on an emotional roller coaster with you. You can have that joy ride. I'm not interested, right? So we can also have boundaries around conversations. There's some conversations I'm willing to have and others that I'm not. And maybe on some days I might have that conversation, but today's not the day. And it's okay to set boundaries around that and say, no, I'm not interested, you know, or, you know, you could do Google works. You don't have to talk to me about that.
You don't say you don't have to be a person's personal Google.
There's an internet for that, right? And usually there's an app for that right about now.
Yeah, I think that's really good point though, right? Because the point is, and I had a conversation with somebody earlier, like the work of racism it's like we may be at the face of it, but it's not our work, right? So it's like it's the work of the people who are racist. It's the work of the decision makers and the people, you know, it's their job to get educated and to do it. Like I can maybe, you know, give you some suggestions or support you along the way, but it's not my job to put you on my back and carry you. You know, so just being really clear about that, like this is your work. It's your work to be able to address the pathologies that are there and these biases and all these other things that are contributing to your perspective and the decisions that you're making that is negatively impacting the majority, I'm gonna say, because we're not minority.
Thank you.
Facts on that. That being said, because man, y'all going in and y'all going heavy, and I love it. That's why I have system breaker conversations, because we want this dialogue to be there. We want people to understand that yes, race is a real issue, but like Sumaiyah said, it's not our issue, right? We've been drugged into the map for the issue. We've been drugged into the ring, but this isn't our issue. issue. We didn't set up the systems. We didn't set up the programs, the organizations, the policies, the war on drugs, the welfare system that took fathers from homes. All of these things were systems that were done by those in power, right? And that wasn't us. With that, let me ask you guys, what are some of your influences in the work? It could be people, it could be situations, circumstances. What are some of the influences in the work that you do? And Sumaiyah, I'll have you go first to answer that.
That is a hard question. I would say, like, if I like move over this way, it's like a bunch of books back there, right? So I would say, like, going to people who came before me. Arnitta talked about Dr. Joy DeGruy, who's amazing, and I've had an opportunity to meet her several times and speak with her and like study the work that she's done. There's countless others. I know if you think about even Carter G. Woodson and others, if you pick up the books that they wrote almost 100 years ago and you start flipping through and you're like, wait a minute, like, was this like 1900 or was this 2020? Because they're still talking about, like the same sorts of issues and challenges and inter-race dynamics and intra-race dynamics, all these sorts of things. And so I think going to our elders and the works that came before us to get a better understanding of what we're seeing and why these things are happening is like something that's really served to influence me.
Yeah, I have to echo Sumaiyah with Dr. Joy DeGruy. I've been saying for years she's my auntie and my mentor in my head. And so, like Sumaiyah, I've had it really is a privilege, like, to have met her and spoken with her and read her book and follow her work, taking her online class. I'm like watching everything she does. Because she's just absolutely amazing. So she's one of my influences from a distance. I've been blessed to just be raised under, both spiritually and just in general, some amazing and powerful women. And so I have always been taught that, my voice was important, that I have one, that it's important, and that I don't have to knock it down a notch for anyone, male, female, or otherwise. And so those influences have been important in my family and my extended family, and all of the support that I've had. And then just watching other amazing people. So I pay attention to people that are doing great things. Sumaiyah is, a person that does amazing work. And so if Sumaiyah calls, I'm like, okay, yes, because I admire her. There are folks on the team I work with right now, the OVP team and 414 Life team, that I think are amazing, and I admire them, and I watch the work that they do, and I learn from them. And the biggest thing I think that I received from, the folks that have influenced me is that you got to always be teachable. And if you come to a space or a place where you are always the one who knows everything, or no one can tell you anything, or you can never be corrected, then you are out of place. You out of place, you out of pocket, you're out of line, and you are never going to grow to the extent that you can grow when you come, you really humble yourself and be willing to listen, to learn, to integrate new things. And so, yeah, those are some of the things and people that, have influenced me along the way. Even though I didn't name all of them specifically, some of them know who they are, others have gone on. But yeah.
Well, thank you for that, both of you, talking about your influences and what that looks like for you. So what you're seeing me doing right now, I'm trying to work my system here, and every once in a while, I've learned just in this conversation that we're having that when Arnitta is on and Sumaiyah are both on screen, there's some weird feedback that's happening. I don't know why that is. So that's why I'm taking Sumaiyah off. So it's not that I don't want her to have that shine.
Yeah, it's okay.
So that's why that's happening, because for some reason there's some weird echoey thing that's happening when you are both on and Arnitta is speaking, but it doesn't seem to happen when Sumaiyah is speaking. So it's weird. I don't know what's going on in my world. There's a gremlin in my computer or something. I don't know.
It's the man.
There's the man holding me down once again. It's these systems. So knowing that, what are Arnitta? Actually, are you about to have to go on us? Can you hear us, Arnitta? I don't think Arnitta can hear us. Okay, so we're gonna try and get that rectified on that end with Arnitta. I'm gonna take her off screen for a moment. So Sumaiyah, can you talk a little bit about what are we doing in the community to attack the issues that we're facing in our community? So when it comes to the violence, because the argument is, what are you doing about black on black crime? We know that's a myth. We know that's mythology about black on black crime. We know it's communal crime, right? Communities have their crime based on proximity. We know this. But what are we doing in Milwaukee County to combat some of the systems that we see that are impacting and some of the crime that we're seeing happen? And we're going to try and get Arnitta to hear us again.
Okay, so that's a really heavy question. And so it's kind of frustrating when I hear people talk about that, because we're not looking at all of the structural things and pressures and things that are negatively impacting people. And instead we choose to, criminalize them. Oh, well, you do this. And so it's really a way to say, oh, well, they're doing this to you and they've been doing this to you for hundreds of years. Oh, but y'all do it to yourselves too, right? So that's like a really insensitive and an insensitive and uneducated response to, the plight that Black people have experiencing. So I just, that always really bothers me when we say that. One of the things that I will say is our community is doing lots of things to take care of ourselves, right? Even today, there were some challenges that happened, like over Independence Day weekend, over the July 4th weekend. But there's a bunch of community members and elected officials that are going to a place where youth have been congregating and making sure that they're engaging in social distancing. They have, the personal protective equipment and masks and stuff. And there's some other activities that they can do safely and get connected to some support, right? So that's just one example of many of hundreds, faith-based leaders, at churches, at mosques. There's community organizations, youth serving organizations. There's people in neighborhoods that are stepping up and doing what they need to protect themselves and to care for themselves. And that's something that we've always done as Black people, right? Because you talked earlier about, Social Security and child welfare system and stuff. Well, yeah, they take our kids, but there was a time where but there was a time before where our kids weren't even allowed there, so you had aunts and big mamas and people who were sending their kids around to make sure that they were cared for. So I think we've always been there to take care of our communities. We've had some bumps and bruises along the way, but we're still there doing it.
Yeah, I couldn't hear the entire question, but to the point around Black and Black crime, like that's a fallacy. The reality is, it's when you think about, this idea of Black and Black crime, it's not a thing really, because it's about proximity. So white people commit more crimes against white people. Hispanic people commit more crimes against Hispanic people. Asian people commit more crimes against Asian people. And why isn't it no one says white on white crime, Hispanic, Latino crime, or against Latino crime, Asian crime, this Asian crime on Asian crime is a pandemic. It's an issue. It's only around Black folks. And so that is systemic, that there is reason for that. And so it is to downplay, to devalue us, to further the stereotypes around Black folks are criminals and all of those negative stereotypes that we know are not true. So I hate that term. I hate when people bring it up, and hate is a strong word. And I feel all the hate around when people bring up, what about Black on Black crime? And you're doing it to yourselves. People of other races are also doing it to each other as well. So if you look at the statistics, it's that way in any group, not just Black folks. So if you're not saying what's going on with white on white crime, I don't want to hear it. And I mean that. Now, to Sumaiyah's point, because I'm gonna leave that hate over there. Point around things that are going on. Absolutely, this was not a good weekend for the city in terms of shootings. So there were a number of non-fatal shootings, I believe around 11 or 16. It was way too many, I'll say that. And so one of the things we're doing in conjunction with County Supervisor Saquana Taylor, Senator Lena Taylor, some other elected officials, some other groups, ComForce, and so OVP 414 Life. So we're getting together to bring some hope, spread some love, some joy in the very area where there were some of the shooting happened. So tonight we'll be at Midtown, in the Midtown area at 6 p.m. So there'll be games. There'll be some fun going on, so please come out. And then we'll be doing something later in the week, so we'll have more details about that coming later in the week. So you can watch our Facebook page, City of Milwaukee Office of Violence Prevention, so you'll hear about that. But there are a lot of things that there's so much good that's happening in our community, and that does not get lifted up enough. There the programs, like MSK, My Sister's Keeper, Tina and Shelly, Flood the Hood with Dreams, Kwabana and Muhib. There are programs like the Running Rebels, Be the Change. There's so many things happening in our community. There are young people.
I think we have lost Arnitta.
Yeah, it's probably because of the storm. So
Yeah, I know she was having some power issues. Oh, she's popped back. Let's see if she's there. No, it doesn't look like she's fully back yet. All right, so as is a ton, and I think she's back. Here we go. Hey there. Can you hear us? Oh, now we can't hear you. We can't hear you. So we're gonna take you off screen for a little bit. See if we can rectify that. Oh, technology, you gotta love it. So Sumaiyah, we're gonna wrap up pretty soon. If we can get Arnitta back, we will, and get her to give us what I would like are your final thoughts and final words for this conversation. So thinking about all the things that we have talked about, all the things that we discussed, if you want to give your synopsis, your wrap up, and what are your hopes for some next steps, if you can do that. Arnitta, if you heard that question, I'm gonna like you to do that as well, and we will go from there. Sumaiyah, you are up. Arnitta, you're on deck.
thanks. So that's a tough one. I would say though, just remain hopeful and keep pushing and keep fighting. These systems were not built in a day, and it's not going to take a day or a week or a month or even a year to really either dismantle, these systems of oppression, implement new stuff, to figure out and even come to some sort of agreement on like what this new systems or whatever should even look like, right? So that's going to take lots of work, right? But I guess I would say stay hopeful, be very intentional about, using this time to connect with your loved ones. Like Black and Brown people are very, community centered. We're very, we're a collective community, and so make sure that you're reaching out to others, in your support system, your tribe, your team, to stay connected and to really cultivate that form of your health. The other things that I would say is, use your voice, like if, both of my grandfathers were veterans, like one, never really talked about it, just all the racism and things that he experienced, but like they fought for this country, and so just I feel like this is it is my, not only just like my duty to speak out against these things, but also, I feel like it's my duty, and it's also my right to be able to have, the same and better that everyone else has, so continue the fight, continue the struggle. It's not going to be easy. Reach out to those who love you. Reach out and make more connections. Be very clear about your boundaries and when you need to tap out, and have no shame in that, because this is hard. It's hard work, and it's also heart work. So be very, be gentle with yourself as well.
Very powerful words. I'm going to ask you to hang on because there was another question that came up for me that I want to ask. Arnita, I'm going to let you go ahead and speak to that as well with the wrap up. But I do have one more question I want you both to answer. So, Arnita, it's on you. We're not able to hear you. It was perfect. We can't hear you. Oh, we cannot hear what she's saying. I'm going to take you off screen for a second. Oh. So what I would like to ask, unfortunately, we won't hear Anita's wrap up. So Sumaiyah, what do you feel as far as the equity versus equality conversation? I know you've probably heard and seen pieces of that or been involved in that discussion. What does that look like from your lens?
Yeah, so that's kind of common. And sometimes you see like there's like a little infographic where there's people standing on like different level or different tiered stools peeking over, trying to see the game being played. And some people say, oh, well, the solution is just to make sure that everybody has the same thing. Well, if everybody has the same thing, that's equality, right? So when my dad used to describe this to us when we were kids, because he would describe like why some of us got to go and do certain things and some of us got to do, receive certain things, right? Like he had a bigger plate than I did because he ate more than I, like based on what his needs were. So that's more about equity. Equity is more like when you understand like the needs that people have and you make sure that they're fed according to their need, not just based on everybody gets one scoop, right? So I think that's equity, equality. That's the difference between the two. But the challenge though, and I'll go back to that infographic, is that it's not enough just for you to come and make sure that you dish out like my needs, but because we've been oppressed for so long, we're going to need an opportunity to practice so that we can get good and go into the game and be able to win. We're going to need to think about, well, who gets to make the decisions? Who's benefiting from the decisions and the rules? Like I say, who's the umpire in that game? So who gets the chance to say, oh, strike, you're out, versus the other person letting them run? So all of these things have to be thought about and challenged as we talk about this equity conversation. So there's a lot of different layers that we have to address. Power dynamics, who has resources, who gets to decide on the resources, who has the power to take them away, who has the power to say you've had enough to eat versus, you. So there's all these things, that I think are a part of this equality versus equity conversation.
And we're getting on that hour mark, but do you think there is a fear for some people who have been able to say that they've had the power, and so with the white community, that if Black people do step forward and have that opportunity, that we're going to do things to them that were done to us? Is that a fear you think, or you can sense that they might have? We know it's not true. We don't operate that way. But do you think that's something that we're seeing as far as the fight against this?
That could be one thing, but what it comes down to is like money and power, right? So I think that there's probably like less fear that, oh, here comes the big boogeyman that's going to come and get me and take it away and, string me up like my parents did.
Like they did us, right?
It's more about this attitude of lack, right? And so when you have an attitude of lack, that is where I think Arnita was saying earlier about like this pathology, right? So there's something, and I know Toni Morrison talked quite a bit about this, her soul rest in peace. She talked quite a bit about how racism is a psychological disorder, right? And so if you think about racism from that perspective, it's like you're so focused on, like keeping power at all costs. And if you eat, then that means that there's less for me to eat in my own kitchen. And that's not what we're asking for. We're not asking to take away from you. And honestly, there's enough here that everybody can have seconds and thirds. But so that's to me, the real problem is about not wanting to step off of it. And I'm not even asking you to give me a handout. I'll go get it myself. I don't want my son to go out and get shot by the police. Just thinking about these sorts of things, there's like these policies and these things that are killing us that we need to stop. Testing and medical testing, all kinds of stuff. Like those are the things that we're saying need to stop. Like, can I live?
Right. Can I live is the question, right? Can you remove the foot breathe? I don't have a problem breathing unless there's a foot on my neck. That kind of makes it hard for me. And so you're talking about that idea of removing those systematic structures, changing the police and how they operate and how they're seen in our community. So like you said, your son can go out and feel safe and feel like he doesn't have to fear for his life when someone pulls up on him in a squad car.
Right.
Those are real things that we face. So with that being said, we're at the hour mark. I want to thank you, Sumaiyah. I want to thank Arnitta, who ended up being disconnected from us, and we hate that she was not able to stay for the full conversation. But I do hope you both can be back for another System Breakers conversation. I'll probably invite a few more people, so we maybe have maybe a panel of 3 or 4, and we can talk a little more about these issues and some other things that we didn't even get a chance to get to in this hour. I do really appreciate you, Sumaiyah, being here. A lot of people don't know that we go back. We were just talking about that to 97.
How is that possible when I'm only 25?
I don't know how you did it, but I just know I got old. I mean, you stay young forever. I get that. I ain't gonna mess it up for you. But it's been a while since we've been in this work. We started back at a place called Rosalie Manor Community and Family Services back in the day. A program called FUPTP. There's some people that might be listening to this that might be products of FUPTP. How y'all doing? What's good?
Hey.
So, Sumaiyah, thank you. Thank you for everyone who tuned in, who watch partied, who is sharing this, who's spreading the word about System Breaker Conversations. I thank you for that. I look forward to the next time we meet again for changing the way the systems work and operate and making sure that we're keeping the discussion of trauma, race, and relationships alive. Thank you very much. Love you all, and I'll talk to you soon. System Breaker Conversations.